There is a plant that has survived everything humanity has thrown at it. It survived the atomic bomb. When scientists tested nuclear weapons in the Nevada desert, they returned months later to document the destruction. Nothing should have been growing. The radiation levels were lethal. The soil was poisoned. But something was growing, pushing through irradiated sand, green and alive in a landscape of death. This plant survived 500 years of deliberate extermination. When Spanish conquistadors invaded the Americas, they burned fields of it. They made growing it punishable by death. They cut off the hands of farmers caught cultivating it. They tried to erase it from existence. It survived anyway. This plant survived, being renamed. When Europeans could not destroy it, they called it pigweed, animal food, something only the desperate would eat. They stripped away 4,000 years of reverence and replaced it with contempt. Today, American farmers spend $2 billion every year trying to kill this plant. They spray it with herbicides. They engineer crops specifically to resist chemicals that destroy it. They call it their worst enemy. And while they fight it, people across Asia, Africa, and South America harvest it as one of the most nutritious foods on earth. More protein than any grain. All 9 essential amino acids, more iron than spinach, more calcium than milk. A complete food that grows without irrigation, without fertilizer, without pesticides, without any help at all. NASA studied it for space missions. The United Nations declared it one of the most promising crops for feeding the world. Scientists have confirmed it is more nutritious than almost anything we cultivate, and we call it a weed. This is the story of amaranth, the plant that empires tried to erase, the food that could end hunger, and the reason why the most powerful crop on earth is something you have been taught to destroy. If this matters to you, subscribe and hit the bell. The file is open. The story begins 8,000 years ago in what is now southern Mexico. The people who would become the Aztecs discovered a plant growing wild in the highlands. It produced thousands of tiny seeds, each one packed with nutrition that no other plant could match. They called it Whately, the source of life. For the next 4,000 years, they cultivated it obsessively. Amaranth became one of the 3 foundational crops of Mesoamerican civilization, alongside corn and beans. But amaranth held a status the others did not. It was sacred. Aztec priests mixed amaranth with honey and human blood to create effigies of their gods. Worshippers consumed these figures in ceremonies that bound them to the divine. The plant was not just food, it was a bridge between humans and the heavens. At its peak, the Aztec Empire collected 20,000 tons of amaranth annually as tribute from conquered peoples, the same amount of tribute they collected of corn. This was not a minor crop. It fed millions. When Hernan Cortes and his conquistadors arrived in 1519, they encountered a civilization built partly on a plant they had never seen. They also encountered religious practices they considered demonic. The consumption of gut effigies looked too much like a twisted mockery of Christian communion. The Spanish priests who accompanied Cortes were horrified. They declared amaranth the food of devil worship. What followed was agricultural genocide. Cortes banned amaranth cultivation throughout the conquered territories. Growing it became a crime punishable by death. Spanish soldiers burned amaranth fields wherever they found them. Farmers caught with seeds had their hands cut off as a warning to others. The Spanish understood something that modern agriculture has forgotten. Controlled the food, and you controlled the people. Amaranth was dangerous precisely because it was so easy to grow. It did not need irrigation. It did not need careful cultivation. A farmer could scatter seeds and walk away, returning months later to a harvest that would feed his family for a year. A population that could feed itself without Spanish permission was a population that might resist Spanish rule. So amaranth had to die. But plants do not follow human laws. While the Spanish burned cultivated fields, wild amaranth continued growing in the mountains, in the margins, in places conquistadors never thought to look. Indigenous communities hid seeds and planted them in secret. The knowledge of cultivation passed from mother to daughter in whispers. For 500 years, amaranth survived in the shadows. When scientists returned to Mexico in the 20th century, they found amaranth still growing, still being quietly cultivated by descendants of the people who had grown it for 4,000 years. The Spanish had failed. The plant that empires tried to erase was still waiting. In July 1962, the United States detonated a nuclear weapon 900 feet above the Nevada desert. The test was called Sedan. It was part of Operation Plowshare, an attempt to find peaceful uses for nuclear explosions. The explosion created a crater 1,280 feet wide and 320 feet deep. It displaced 12 million tons of earth. It released radiation that would contaminate the area for decades. Scientists from the Atomic Energy Commission returned to the site regularly to document the effects. They expected to find nothing alive. The radiation levels in the fallout zone exceeded anything that life should tolerate. On one visit in 1963, a botanist named Dr. Janice Beatley noticed something growing in the crater's edge. It was amaranth, not sickly, struggling growth. Healthy, vigorous plants producing seeds as if the atomic blast had never happened. Dr. Beatley documented the finding in a paper that would be cited by radiation biologists for decades. How had this plant survived what should have killed everything? The answer lies in amaranth's genetics. Amaranth is what scientists call a C4 plant, using a photosynthetic pathway that is more efficient than most plants. This efficiency extends to DNA repair. When radiation damages genetic material, most organisms accumulate mutations that eventually kill them. Amaranth repairs the damage faster than it accumulates. The same mechanism allows amaranth to tolerate extreme heat, extreme drought, and soil conditions that would kill ordinary crops. Evolution had spent 60 million years engineering the perfect survivor, and humans had spent 500 years calling it a weed. Dr. Beatley was not the only scientist paying attention. In 1977, a researcher at Rodale Institute named Robert Rodale came across historical records of amaranth cultivation in ancient Mexico. The nutritional data astonished him. Amaranth grain contains 13 to 14% protein. Wheat contains 10%. Corn contains 9%. Rice contains 7%. But the quality of protein matters more than the quantity. Proteins are made of amino acids. There are 9 amino acids that humans cannot synthesize. We must obtain them from food. Most plant proteins are incomplete, lacking one or more of these essential amino acids. This is why vegetarians must combine foods carefully to get complete nutrition. Amaranth protein is complete. It contains all 9 essential amino acids in proportions almost perfectly matched to human nutritional needs. The limiting amino acid in most grains is lysine. Amaranth contains 3 times more lysine than wheat. Rodale continued researching. The nutritional profile kept getting better. Amaranth contains more iron than spinach, more calcium than milk. Significant amounts of magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, zinc, copper, and manganese. Vitamin B6, folate, riboflavin, and vitamin EA single plant. Growing without inputs, providing nutrition that processed foods spend billions trying to replicate with supplements. Rodale began a breeding program to develop amaranth varieties suited to American agriculture. He believed he had found the crop that could change the world. He was not alone. In 1979, the National Academy of Sciences published a report titled Underexploited Tropical Plants with Promising Economic Value. Amaranth appeared prominently in the recommendation. In 1984, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization added amaranth to its list of crops recommended for widespread cultivation in developing nations. In 1985, NASA began studying amaranth as a potential food source for long-duration space missions. The combination of complete nutrition, compact growth, and tolerance for marginal conditions made it nearly ideal for closed ecological systems. The science was clear. Amaranth was not just a survival food. It was potentially the most important crop that modern agriculture was not growing. So why didn't anything change? The answer lies in a chemical called glyphosate. In 1974, Monsanto introduced Roundup, an herbicide based on glyphosate. It killed virtually all plants by disrupting a metabolic pathway essential for protein synthesis. Within a decade, it had become the most widely used herbicide in history. In 1996, Monsanto introduced Roundup Ready soybeans. These genetically modified crops had been engineered to survive glyphosate. Farmers could spray entire fields, killing every weed while their soybeans thrived. The product was revolutionary. It simplified weed control dramatically. Farmers adopted it enthusiastically, but there was a problem growing in the fields. Amaranth was not dying. By 2000, farmers in Georgia, Arkansas, and Tennessee began reporting amaranth populations that survived Roundup applications. By 2005, resistant amaranth had spread across the American South. By 2010, it had become the most economically damaging weed in American agriculture. The industry called it Palmer amaranth, after the specific species causing the most damage. They called it superweed. They called it a crisis. They never called it a food. The chemical industry responded to resistant amaranth the only way it knew how, with more chemicals. New herbicides were developed, dicamba 2, 4-D, glufosinate. Crops were engineered to resist these chemicals too. The arms race escalated between 2000 and 2020. Herbicide use on American farms increased by over 300 million pounds. Much of that increase was specifically to combat amaranth, $2 billion per year. That is what American agriculture currently spends fighting a plant that humans cultivated as a staple food for 4,000 years. The absurdity is total. The same plant that NASA studied to feed astronauts, American farmers poisoned to grow soybeans. The same plant that the UN recommended for fighting global hunger, agricultural corporations engineer crops to destroy. The same plant that contains more complete protein than any grain we cultivate, we categorize as a noxious weed and exterminate with chemicals. There is a reason for this absurdity. It is not stupidity. It is economics. Amaranth does not fit the industrial agricultural model. The industrial model is built on purchased inputs, seeds that must be bought every year, fertilizers that must be applied every season, pesticides that must be sprayed repeatedly, machinery that must be financed. A farmer locked into this system becomes a customer for life. Amaranth breaks the model. Amaranth reseeds itself. One planting can produce harvest after harvest without buying new seeds. Amaranth grows without fertilizer. Its deep roots access nutrients that shallow-rooted crops cannot reach. Amaranth resists pests through its own chemistry without purchased pesticides. A farmer who grows amaranth is a farmer who stops buying. The seed industry cannot profit from a plant that reproduces itself. The fertilizer industry cannot profit from a plant that needs no inputs. The pesticide industry cannot profit from a plant that resists pests naturally. Amaranth is not a weed because it is worthless. Amaranth is a weed because it threatens industries worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The classification is economic, not botanical. In 2015, a farmer in western Kansas named Carl Nichols did something unusual. Instead of spraying the amaranth growing in his fields, he harvested it. Nichols had been reading about amaranth's history. He had seen the nutritional data. He had noticed that no matter how much herbicide he applied, the amaranth kept coming back. He started wondering if he was fighting the wrong enemy. That first harvest produced 1,200 pounds per acre with zero inputs. No irrigation, no fertilizer, no pesticide. Just a plant growing where the wind had scattered seeds. He sold the grain to a health food distributor for $1.40 per pound. His zero-input crop earned $1,680 per acre. The soybeans in his adjacent field, grown with $150 per acre in seeds and chemicals, earned $400 per acre at harvest. Nichols converted more acreage the following year. The amaranth that his neighbors were spending fortunes to kill, he was selling at premium prices to customers hungry for nutrition that industrial agriculture does not provide. Word spread quietly among farmers in the region. The agricultural establishment did not report on Nichols. Extension services did not hold seminars about his success. The farming press did not feature his story, because his story threatens the people who fund agricultural extension, who advertise in farming publications, who donate to land-grant universities. A farmer who earns more by not buying their products is not a success story they want told. The international picture is different. In India, amaranth is called rajira, the king's grain. It is cultivated across the subcontinent, processed into flour, puffed like popcorn, made into sweets. Annual production exceeds 50,000 tons. Nobody calls it a weed. In Nepal, amaranth leaves are a common vegetable, cooked like spinach but with vastly superior nutrition. The greens contain even more protein than the seeds, up to 30% by dry weight. In Peru, amaranth cultivation has revived dramatically since the 1970s. The Peruvian government actively promotes it as a food security crop, recognizing what the conquistadors tried to destroy. In China, amaranth is grown for both grain and greens on millions of acres. Research institutions study yield improvement and processing methods. The ancient crop has been integrated into modern agricultural systems. In Africa, amaranth has emerged as one of the most important leafy vegetables across the continent. It grows in conditions where other crops fail. It provides protein to populations that cannot afford meat. It has saved lives during droughts and famines that would have killed millions without it. Only in the United States, the country with the most advanced agricultural system on Earth, is amaranth considered an enemy. The evidence is everywhere for anyone willing to look. We spend billions killing what others cultivate for survival. We engineered genetic modifications to destroy what evolution perfected over 60 million years. We classify as noxious what the United Nations recommends for food security. We have been told to hate a plant that could feed us better than almost anything we grow. The telling happened gradually over generations. When Spanish conquistadors renamed Whatley as pigweed, they began the process. When American farmers adopted that language, they continued it. When chemical companies funded research into killing amaranth rather than cultivating it, they accelerated it. Today, most Americans have never heard of amaranth. Those who have usually know it only as a weed their fathers cursed. The knowledge that this weed is more nutritious than anything in their refrigerator has been erased. You can undo that erasure this afternoon. Amaranth grows anywhere. It tolerates drought that would kill tomatoes. It thrives in heat that wilts lettuce. It produces food in soil so poor that other crops would starve. The seeds are available online and at garden centers, sold as ornamental plants for their striking red flower plumes. Nobody mentions they are edible. Nobody explains that the seeds are more nutritious than any grain in the store. Plant them and you will have protein by late summer. Complete protein. All 9 essential amino acids. More iron than spinach, more calcium than milk. The greens are ready to harvest in 30 days. Cut them like lettuce and they regrow. One planting provides salad all season. The seeds mature in 90 days. Each plant produces tens of thousands, enough to replant next year with thousands left to eat. This is the plant that Spanish conquistadors killed people for growing. This is the food that fed civilizations for 4,000 years. This is the crop that NASA studied to nourish astronauts on missions to Mars. It grows in sidewalk cracks, classified as a weed, while we spray poison to protect crops with half its nutrition. The conquistadors failed to erase amaranth. The chemical industry is failing to every year. Resistant amaranth spreads further across American fields. Every year, the herbicides work less. Every year, farmers spend more fighting what they could be harvesting. The plant that survived nuclear fallout will survive Roundup. It will survive dicamba and 2,4-D, and whatever chemistry comes next. It has 60 million years of evolution behind it. It is not going anywhere. The only question is whether we will keep fighting it or finally recognize what it is. The most nutritious crop in the Americas, growing for free, waiting to be harvested. If this video helped you, subscribe and hit the bell. Every share preserves what they tried to erase. The next video opens soon.